everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. So far this month, I have talked about really emotional romances that made me cry, as well as romances that made me laugh out loud because that's how funny they are. So today I wanted to talk about the sexiest and spiciest romances that I have ever read that have made me want to get a fan out, okay? They are just so hot that I had to like put the books down at some point to like gather myself, okay? So for me personally, like sexy and spicy books, they aren't necessarily books that just have like a ton of sex scenes or have the most explicit sex scenes. For me, it's really important that the characters who are being intimate with each other have a very strong connection, very strong chemistry, right? So that I am really feeling invested in their intimate scenes, right? So some of these books on this list, you know, do have quite a lot of sex scenes or are more erotic romances, but some of the romances on this list are just books where I just really felt connected to the characters and to their chemistry. So first author I have to bring up on this list is absolutely Nicola Davidson, who is my top favorite erotic historical romance author. By the way, if you don't know the difference between an erotic romance and just a regular romance novel, in an erotic romance, the erotic or sexual part of the relationship between the characters in the story is a very important part of the development of their relationship. Whereas in a regular romance, it's more so maybe about the emotional connection, right? So we have the Fallen series, which would be my top recommendation from Nicola Davidson. So this centers around Fallen, which is a sex club. And we have our three heroes of the three novellas. They co-own this club together. I'm holding up The Devil's Submission, which is book 2, which is a marriage and trouble romance that centers around Eliza and Grayson, and we have a femdom heroine and a submissive hero. So this was actually the first novella that I had read by Nicola Davidson, and I did not know what to expect going into this, but I was just so invested and blown away by how hot this novella is, as well as books 1 and 3 of this series. Like, this is just a very strong novella series in its own right. All three novellas are incredibly hot and sexy, and Nicola Davidson really goes there. So if you are someone that thinks that historical romances can't be hot, you need to pick up this series and you need to pick up Nicola Davidson in general. Another book that has stood out in my mind since I read it back in like 2020 or 2021 for how like hot it is The Scandalous Diary of Lily Layton by Stacy Reed. So I have truly enjoyed every book that I've read by Stacy Reed, and I would say all of her books are pretty sexy, but this one is on a different level. So Lily Layton, our main character, she has this diary where she writes about everything going on in her life, okay? Like she has quite the scandalous life, as the title would suggest. So this is her romance with Oliver, and their meet cute. Talk about starting the book off with a bang, literally, because Lily and Oliver find themselves in this secret passageway in, I believe, Lily's house. And so they're in like complete darkness. They can't see each other, but they're just like immediately attracted to each other, and they just have sex. That's how they meet. And it goes on from there. There is some exhibitionism, there's some voyeurism, there's a lot going on in this book. Next, we need to talk about my queen, Katie Robert, because oh boy, does she write some hot erotic romances. So the very first book that I had read by Katie Robert was Learn My Lesson. This is a poly romance, a part of her Wicked Villain series, which are Disney movie retellings where the villains get the girl, basically. So this is a poly romance between Hades, Hercules, and Meg. By the way, there's no magic in this world, really. So they are humans. They aren't like creatures or anything. But I remember vividly, there are parts of this book where I literally had to put the book down and like collect myself, because I was not prepared for how like mesmerized I was by the writing style and just how hot the sex scenes were, and like the connection between all three of these characters is absolutely everything. Like, I need to reread this book soon. Like, this book is pretty darn near perfect. Literally every book in this series though goes there. Like, these are amazing erotic romances, but this one just happens to be my favorite, so that's why I brought it up. But there are scenes, like in A Worthy Opponent, there was a pretty iconic orgy scene with like 5 people, I think. Like, this series really goes there, girl. You just gotta be prepared when you go into these books, but they are truly amazing. And another series that I adore by Katie Robert is her Touch of Taboo series. These are novellas that are not connected in any way except that they are a touch of taboo. These are literally some of the hottest books I have ever read. Your Dad Will Do, book 1, I think is the filthiest thing I've ever read, like to this day, which is really saying something because I read some crazy things at this point, but that novella in particular still stands out in my mind. But I also really, really loved, oh, the Christmas one, something about gifting her to my best friend or something, but that one's like an MMF romance. And then I also really loved the Dad's Best Friend one. Again, these are just incredibly hot and sexy novellas that really go there. Katie Robert does not shy away, girl. Like, yeah, these novellas are everything. I need to continue on with the series. I think there's like one more novella that I haven't read yet, the Guardian one, that I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, I adore pretty much everything that I've read by Katie Robert, and they are all just some of the hottest books that I have ever read, for sure. Next one I want to bring up is Bottle Rocket by Erin McClellan. Erin McClellan writes some very hot romances. So this is part of like a holiday novella series. This is my personal favorite. It's a second chance romance between Leo and Rosie. They fell in love when they were like 18 years old, but they ended up separating because Rosie went to college and Leo kind of went his own way in life. And now it's like 12 years later. Rosie married someone, now she's divorced, and so they are back in each other's lives, and they come up with this like bucket list of things, of spicy things that they want to do with each other before they go their separate ways again. One of the things that stands out about Erin McClellan's romances is her use of toys in the bedroom. This novella also had an orgy scene. Yeah, things get wild and crazy for sure, and this was amazing. I mean, this romance also had like an incredible like emotional connection between Leo and Rosie. I think I teared up, maybe even cried at some point while reading this one. Next up, I want to recommend Lady of Rooksgrave Manor by Catherine Moon. This is still the only book that I've read by Catherine Moon at this point. I know I need to read more, guys. I know. Catherine Moon has quite the backlist of all kinds of different kinds of romances, but this is a monster why choose romance. We have Esther, our main character, who she is someone that's always really enjoyed sex and pleasure. And so this man who is a doctor, I think he's Dr. Underwood, he's kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation, but they have like a one-night stand together. And Dr. Underwood realizes that she would be perfect for Rooksgrave Manor, which is this house that has all these human women that have relationships with various different monster men. And so she ends up having relationships with 5 different kinds of monster men. Very, very sexy. This book, honestly, truly, I would say it's like 90% sex scenes. Like, there's a lot going on in this book for sure. But it was very unique, really fun, because I love paranormal historical romances. This also had kind of a gothic vibe to it. So yeah, it was just really great. I need to read book 2 of this series very soon. That one's A Company of Fiends, and I've heard that that one is more poly, whereas this one was more why choose. Next up, I'm going to bring up some historical romance authors and some of my favorite books by them that I just think are incredibly hot. So first I want to bring up Eva Lee. This is How the Wallflower Was Won, which is her most recent release. This is book 2 in her Last Chance Scoundrel series. This one was a marriage of convenience romance between Finn and Tabitha, who it's kind of like an opposites attract situation. But Eva Lee, oh my god, like she always surprises me with her steamy scenes, because like I'm always like reading her books and I'm like, you know what, this is a really great solid historical romance, and then a steamy scene comes up and the hero always has an incredibly dirty mouth on him. The dirty talk is just top notch, chef's kiss, and it always just like blows me away and surprises me, and it's just absolutely everything. And so I remember when I was reading this book and book 1 of this series, I was just like, oh, okay, you're really going there. Like Finn, the hero of this one, I was like, he has quite the mouth on him. All right, all right. You know, I'm very excited for book 3 of this series. Oh man, I forget what that one's called, but we're finally getting Dom and Willa's story. I just kind of wanted to throw that in there, that I'm very excited for their romance. But yeah, Eva Lee is, oh man, her steamy scenes are some of the absolute best that I have read from, especially like traditionally published historical romances. Another author that I have to bring up, oh my God, is Joanna Shupe, girl. The Bride Goes Rogue still stands out in my mind to this day. I read this over a year ago, but the steamy scenes in this, the French ball scene, if you know, you know, but there's a masquerade ball scene in this where Catherine, our main character, she's just hoping to have a tryst with someone at this French masquerade ball. And so she does, boy does she, but then it turns out that the man that she had this tryst with is Preston, our hero, who is someone that she hates at the moment. But yeah, this is book 3 in her Fifth Avenue Rebel series, and this is still the hottest book that I have read from Joanna Shupe. By the way, if you did not know, now it is becoming public knowledge that Joanna Shupe has a pen name, and that pen name is Mila Finelli. These are bonkers and over-the-top mafia romances. They're contemporary romances. This is the Kings of Italy series, and oh boy, does this series go there with the steam and the spice. Oh man, like if you thought these books were sexy, Mila Finelli really goes there. And I highly recommend the audiobooks, by the way, because I'm obsessed with the male narrator because his Italian accent is like a little too over the top, but it really works for these stories. My personal favorite of this series, by the way, is Mafia Madman, which is Enzo and Gia's romance. That one's Captor Captive. Actually, this one's Captor Captive too. Like, bonkers, over the top, amazing, amazing. This is Mafia Mistress and then Mafia Darling. Both books follow the same couple. This one has more daddy kink involved, and yeah, just perfection. Joanna Shupe, Mila Finelli, whatever name she decides to write by, it's gonna be amazing and it's gonna be incredibly sexy, you know? Next up, I have to talk about the Anti-Heroes in Love duet by Jonah Darling. This is still the only thing I have read by Jonah Darling to this point. I'm sure all of her books are incredibly sexy, but here's the thing with this duet in particular. This is a mafia romance where we have Elena, who's a lawyer, and then Dante, who is a mafia boss. He's been accused of a murder that he didn't commit, and so Elena is on his defense team. They end up having to live together, so it's a forced proximity situation, and Dante is just incredibly charming and sunshiny, but also incredibly ruthless and cutthroat when he needs to be because he is a mafia boss. And the connection, the chemistry, the sexual tension between these two characters is scorching. Like, I literally put in my Goodreads review that I thought my Kindle was going to burst into flames by the time we got to their first sex scene. That's how much chemistry these two characters had. And so, yeah, like I said, it's not so much about like how many sex scenes there were in this duet. It's just about like the chemistry and the connection and just like, oh man, just everything. Everything about this couple is absolutely iconic. And wow, like just simply amazing. Y'all need to bully me into reading more from Jonah Darling. I also want to mention Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. So this is a rivals to lovers romance between Shane and Ilya. Their romance actually spans 2 books. So this is the first one, and then The Long Game is the conclusion to their romance. And oh man, this book, this romance, you guys. So yeah, they are playing on opposing hockey teams. And so this book in particular takes place over like 7 years, something like that, as these two are hooking up with each other and slowly falling for each other. And one of the things that I loved about this book is that, you know, this is truly a soulmate connection. We see that over the years. And even though there are quite a lot of sex scenes in this book, I never found myself getting bored. Like, sometimes there are romances that I've read that like the sex scenes just get monotonous after a while, and like I never found that to be the case with Shane and Ilya because I was just so invested in their romance. Next up, I have to mention the Necessary Evil series by Onley James. Psycho is book 2, and it's my personal favorite of the series. Now, this is a darker romance series that involves vigilante serial killers, so there's a lot of like suspense elements in these books, but the romances, okay, I don't know how Onley James does this, but these romances are like oddly enough sweet and wholesome, but incredibly hot and sexy. Plenty of sex scenes to go around, and I truly never get bored, even though the characters in all 3 books that I've read of the series so far, like they get together, like they hook up very early on in the book, but I'm somehow just like so invested that I never get bored or zone out, even though there's like so many sex scenes, you know, like, ugh, it's just so well done. Truly like a very well-rounded romance series that I just didn't expect to love as much as I do. Definitely need to continue on with this series. I think I just have like a few more books and authors that I want to bring up. First of all is Eyes on Me by Sarah Kate. This is book 2 in her Salacious Players Club series, which is a series of erotic contemporary romances that center around the owners of this sex and pleasure club. And so Eyes on Me is my favorite book so far of the series. I've only read the first 2 books. I know a lot of people really love Praise. I get it, but I personally loved Eyes on Me even more, which is a step-sibling romance. And there's a lot going on with Mia and Garrett, but there's a bit of an age gap between the 2 of them of about like 10 years. And Mia is a cam girl. And so Garrett has been a fan of hers for quite some time, and then he realizes that she is in fact his stepsister. And so they start this like online relationship while also falling for each other in real life. So it gets messy and angsty for sure. But oh my God, what stands out to me about this book is that there are quite a few sex scenes, but Sarah Kate is just very creative with her sex scenes. There's a lot of variety. Like you can't possibly get bored or zone out when reading her romances. Like, oh man, these books are hot. For sure. I also wanted to quickly mention Twisted Hate by Anna Huang, which is book 3 in her Twisted series. The reason why I'm mentioning this one is that this is a true hate to love romance between Jules and Josh, and the hate sex, chef's kiss. Some of the best that I've ever read, because a lot of the time when books are marketed as enemies to lovers or hate to love, it's not true hate, and you don't see them being intimate with each other while they still hate each other. And so books like this just feel incredibly unique to me, and like, man, was I invested. Oh wow. And this is, you know, kind of a chunky book. It's like 500 pages. It's worth every page. The sex scenes are hot. They're wonderful. I also wanted to mention a fan fiction, one of my favorite fanfics that I have read to date. This is Contradictions by Ampersand. I will find the link to this fanfic via Archive of Our Own, and I will link that down below. The only reason why I have a physical copy, by the way, is because of my amazing friend Mel from Mel Binds Fics. She made a copy for me and gifted it to me around the holidays. But this is a BDSM romance between Hermione and Draco of the Harry Potter series, and Hermione is finding that she's just very sexually frustrated, so she signs up with this exclusive sex club to be matched up with a dom because she's more of a submissive. And so it turns out that Draco is the dom that she is paired up with. Their first meet cute scene does not go well because they both realize who each other are, because she goes in glamored so she doesn't look like herself. And so at first she's blindfolded with him, and the blindfold falls off. She sees that it's Draco. She freaks out and disapparates away. And so, yeah, things go on from there. This is an incredible romance. The BDSM in this is some of the best BDSM representation that I have ever read. You could tell that the author really did their research. They actually talked about that in one of like the author notes before one of the chapters, how much research went into the writing of this fanfic, and it really shows. Just absolutely wonderful, incredibly sexy. Grade A praise kink, by the way. I think there was some degradation as well, but I can't quite remember. Yeah, just absolutely wonderful. Another author that I feel writes some of the sexiest romances that I've read is Juliet Cross. I love her Stay a Spell series. I also really love her contemporary romance, which is called Bright Like Wildfire. I'll put the cover over here. This one is kind of like a frenemies to lovers vibe to it. There is one scene in particular in this book that really stands out in my mind as just being incredibly hot, but also like really beautiful and intimate, and I had never read anything quite like it before. So for that alone, pick up this book. It's amazing. But her Stay Spell series, I just have Witches Get Stitches, which is book 3. But these are really great, sexy, small town paranormal romances. They just have a very unique vibe to them, and I feel like a lot of small town romances don't really go there with the steam, but Juliet Cross absolutely does. I do want to also quickly mention Tessa Bailey as another author that I feel writes some incredibly hot romances. One of my favorites by her would be It Happened One Summer. I personally really love that one. I mean, Tessa Bailey really goes there, especially with like the dirty talk. I think Tessa Bailey was one of the first romance authors that I had ever read that really goes there with the dirty talk, and so I was like blown away, especially because her books have these like really cute like illustrated covers. You don't really expect them to be all that hot, and then she blows you away with the steamy scenes, you know? And then last but not least, I have to talk about Sierra Simone. I want to bring up her Ivy Leibold series, which is a series that I'm in the middle of. It's a trilogy of 3 novellas, but this is a spicy Jane Eyre retelling. And when I tell you, Sierra Simone writes some of the hottest sex scenes that I've ever read, but also her writing style is just beautiful, and the way that she incorporates that writing into her intimate scenes is just stunning in my opinion. But yeah, like this romance between Julian and Ivy is just, whew, it is hot. And in the first novella there was an orgy scene, and in the second novella, which I just read the other day, there was an MMF scene, and there's some BDSM elements. Like, she really goes there with the steam, and I just love that this series gives you everything you could want, because you have the gothic historical romance vibe, you have the Jane Eyre vibe, but then you have just the amazing steam that Sierra Simone writes. It's just absolutely everything. But I know that there's a lot of other books by Sierra Simone that I think more people talk about, so I wanted to bring up this series in this video. So that is going to be it for some of the hottest and sexiest and spiciest romances that I have ever read. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to give some recommendations for either myself or other people that are watching this video. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!